As I start the session today, I want to ask a question, but please be honest with yourself. How many cups of coffee did you drink yesterday? In many instances, the numbers I get is about 2 to 4. While they say the rule is you should drink up to 6 cups of coffee a day, and it's actually good for you. But you should drink them black, bitter, and not within 90 minutes from waking. They also say when driving, keep a gap of 3 seconds between you and the car in front of you, especially in the morning if you did not have your first cup of coffee. And it's not 6, 7, you needed to aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. Each of these principles is a generic guideline, so to say a rule of thumb. Today I will be discussing a very important rule of thumb: the key risk of retirement and hybrid annuities. But first, what is a rule of thumb? It's a general principle that is roughly correct or that is correct most of the time. It's an approximation, plus minus. There's a very useful rule of thumb in investments, even more useful than approximating pi, and that is the retirement income rule of thumb. The retirement rule of thumb says if you want a retirement income that lasts and keeps up with inflation for 25 to 30 years, or to say from 65 to 90 and beyond, you should start with an income drawdown of no more than 4 to 5% of the value of your capital. Now at 5%, that is for every 2 million rand invested, a starting income of 100,000 rand per year or 8,300 rands per month. If possible, this is a very good principle to follow, and we are going to discuss some of the mechanics behind it. Now, this is the income drawdown distribution of all our living annuity clients, the new ones and the older ones who've been invested for, let's say, 20 years. For simplicity, I removed all clients drawing less than 3% and those drawing more than 17%. Now, even though the slide does not show the starting income, it gives a clear indication that most people are drawing much higher than 4 to 5% and that the average drawdown is closer to 7%. To gain more insight, let's split the clients now by age. Now, we have age on the horizontal axis and drawdown percentage on the vertical axis, with the number of clients in each cohort represented by the size of the bubble. Now it's interesting to see the disproportionate size of the bubbles there at 10%. We will get back to this shortly. My first example today will start with this cohort. Clients aged 65 drawing income at a 5% level. Now this is one of the cohorts who are following the rule of thumb, and let's focus in on this group. In the example, I have a 2 million rand investment, and the income required is set at a starting level of 5%. For a large part of the session today, I will use an annual 5% escalation in the required income, as depicted by the steps in the light grey area. You will see on the return legend and on the corresponding green bubble that I'm starting with the example with a 6% return assumption, and this is a low return assumption. This will determine how long the income can last. At this return, you start to run out of income in your early 80s. This is the point at which you hit the maximum 17.5% legislative cap on your living annuity. So the question becomes, if 6% is too low, what return is needed to sustain your income? So let's have a look. As the return increases, the income can be maintained for longer. And now, an 8.2% return will do. But this is a net of fee return. In reality, the market-linked investments will probably have to perform at about 9 to 9.5% to maintain the income. What's interesting to note here is with this 5% escalation, the rule of thumb carries an implicit return assumption, that of 8.2%. And this level of return isn't too high or too low. I would say it's just about right. At this level of required return, when returns are a little bit lower, you can hopefully still maneuver a bit by making adjustments to your income, but I digress. The question is, what happens if we break the rule of thumb? If we up the income, to 7% instead of 5%. Now, the return can't sustain the required income anymore. We will again have to increase the return to make the equation work. Reminder, I increased the income by 2%. What do you think is the new return that we would need? And you can see here that a 9% isn't going to cut it. Neither will 10%. We are going to need a 11.2% return. Now the income required was increased by 2%, but the market-linked return needs to be increased by 3%. Again, let me remind you, this is a 11.2% net of fee return. In reality, the market-linked investments will probably have to perform at about 12 to 12.5% gross of fees. This is a very high return to achieve consistently for about 3 decades. As a side note, during the last few years, I've been doing research into the distribution of internal rates of returns, or IRRs, of tens of thousands of living annuity clients, using thousands of different fund combinations from various asset managers across the industry. What I've seen is that the average of the longer term IRRs was very close to 8.2%, or about 3% lower than the 11.2% that we've just discussed. So what happens when you need this income pattern, which means you need an 11.2% return, but you miss that return by 1%? And you can see here, now the income is falling short much earlier than anticipated. It starts to run out at the age of 83. If you miss by 2%, you hit the cap by the age of 80. And if you miss by 3%, your income starts to drop at the age of 78, 12 years earlier than planned. If you were thinking about leaving an inheritance, you're probably not leaving an inheritance anymore. You might actually be leaving a negative inheritance. This seems like doom and gloom, but there are potential ways to improve the outcome by protecting yourself against the key risks of retirement. This is what I will be discussing today. The 5 key risks are the risk of drawing an income that is too high, behavior tax, market risk, inflation risk, and longevity risk. These risks don't live in isolation, and they affect your ability to leave an inheritance. Let's first turn our attention back to this chart. You will remember we started at an income drawdown of 5%, needing a return of 8.2% to maintain the income to the age of 90. When we increased the income to 7%, now we needed a return of 11.2%. And just like this, the required return to maintain the income to age 90 can be calculated for every cohort. You can see here that every combination of age and starting income has a color attached to it, and you can trace it back to the return legend. By the way, the returns are capped at 0% and 15%. But there, in the middle of the return legend, you get that sweet spot. That's the yellow colors. You can see that at the age of 65, the yellow bubble is at the 5% drawdown level, at the rule of thumb level. A client in this cohort is like the poster child of retirement. If you are here, then basically you are following the rule of thumb. Everywhere in this picture where you see yellow, that's basically the cohorts following the rule of thumb. Now that's so interesting because when I started the presentation, I said a rule of thumb is a general principle, one that is correct most of the time. It's not an absolute. And you can see that if you retire earlier than 65, I'm talking about 55 or so, you definitely need to start at a 4% starting income to have a good chance of maintaining your income. Here, at the age of 55, a 5% drawdown is approaching a 10% return, net of fees. If you're only retiring at the age of, let's say, 60 or 70, you can increase your starting income a little bit more. On the other hand, the reality is that there are so many clients drawing incomes that's putting them in the orange or even in the red positions. See those clients there at the 10% drawdown? their retirement incomes will probably not be sustainable at the income rates they are drawing. They may have to reduce their income or not take further increases into the future. The clients in the darker green colors are in a good space. Now the question is, where will you be when you retire? Because if you or your loved ones retire and they use a living annuity, they are going to be in one of these bubbles. There are also other options you can use when you retire. To name some of the key ones, there are living annuities, with-profit annuities, and life annuities. A living annuity is very popular, especially in the advised space. If you're invested in a pure living annuity, you take on the market risk, inflation risk, and longevity risk. But you can run the risk of running out of income, especially when you draw too high an income, but it offers you the ability to transfer your remaining investments to dependents, which is a key reason why living annuities are so popular. Then we have guaranteed annuities. They are the with-profit annuities and the life annuities. We've done some research on with-profit annuities, but I won't cover them today. So, the life annuity. A life annuity is also called a conventional life annuity or a fixed rate increase guaranteed life annuity. As a side note, you can also link the income increases of your life annuity to inflation and not take fixed escalations. But today I'm going to stick to fixed escalations for now, and this is how they work. In return for a purchase amount, you get a life annuity that pays the income for you as long as you live. You can add a spouse and or a guarantee term that may mean the income continues if you pass away. When using a fixed escalation rate, the annual income increases are predetermined. Today, it is assumed to be 5%. I will in one section turn my attention to inflation-linked life annuities. To start off, I'm going to ignore inflation for simplicity. The income that you are promised is dependent on factors such as your age, your gender, the escalation pattern you want, and the rates that are available at that time. For a 1 million Rand purchase price, you might get a starting income of 7,000 Rand, where a few years ago it might have been 6,000 Rand. We are going to have more discussions on that today. But for the remainder of the session today, I'm going to use different terminology. When talking about a life annuity, I will be referring to a guaranteed annuity portfolio, or in short, a GAP. You will understand why in a short while. Let's turn our attention back to living annuities. Now, in general, an investment is a combination of a component and a product. The components can be investment funds, for example, balanced funds or model portfolios. They are what determines the return you get on your investment. The product wrapper determines this legislative rules, such as how your income will be taxed, what income you can take. In a living annuity, you can select an income once a year. Your income drawdown percentage must be between 2.5% and 17.5% of the value of your capital. As you have seen, when I discussed the rule of thumb, when your components don't perform well, or if you draw too much income, your income can start to fall as it will hit the 17.5% gap. But today, I'm going to focus on something called a hybrid annuity. It is, as the name suggests, an annuity that can offer the best of both worlds. But where does a hybrid annuity fit in? Certain living annuities are hybrid living annuities, as they offer guaranteed annuities as components. So like you choose funds, you can choose a guaranteed annuity as a component. When I talk about a hybrid annuity, I'm simply referring to a living annuity that offers guaranteed annuities as components. So now, I want to have the discussion about using the rule of thumb to stretch retirement savings. I want to answer the question, if you want a hybrid annuity income that lasts and keeps up with inflation for 25 to 30 years, what starting income can you start off with? Now, this starting income is dependent on rates. It's not a static thing that I can say to you, this is the number, or this is the result of using a hybrid annuity and is forever going to be this number. It's dependent on annuity rates or annuity incomes, and they fluctuate over time. As an example, in South Africa a year ago, 2024, life annuity rates were at a 2-decade high. So what income did we use in our research as part of the assumptions, and why is this important? As stated, it is important because different starting incomes will lead to better or worse results when doing the research. In our assumptions, the more generic ones are the three in the middle: the escalation, the guaranteed term, and the client. The gap income that we use has an escalation pattern of 5% per year. We added a guaranteed term of 10 years, and this was for a male aged 65. Each of these fields will make a difference in the starting income that a client will receive. But of more importance to me is the starting income. The starting income that we're using is 7,400 Rand on a R1,000,000 investment. This was the prevailing rates when doing the research. And with any research, the research is done at a certain point in time. When you watch the video or when you retire, rates might be much higher or much lower than this if you're using a hybrid annuity. And naturally, the benefits of using a hybrid annuity might be a little bit better or worse than what I'm showing to you today. Now let's put this into context. Let's get a better understanding of how does this rate of income compare to historic rates. In other words, what would the starting income for this client have been at different points in time? When we launched the hybrid annuity in mid-2022, and since then, the average starting income for this client would have been just over 7,400 Rands per month on a similar annuity. That's the three dark blue bars. They show the income available at the start of each calendar year since the launch. This is almost exactly the starting income used in the analysis. Note that the vertical axis starts only at 5,000 Rand. Overall, starting income seems to have fluctuated between 5,500 and 7,500 Rand. But if we zoom in since 2024, starting income shot up to more than 8,000 Rand for 2 months, the highest they've been in 20 years, and by a long margin. At the time of recording, we are close to 6,700 Rand. If we look deeper at the period before the COVID pandemic, there's only been 10 months where rates have been higher. But where will rates go next? Will they go back to 5,500 or back to 7,500? No one can say for certain. But for now, let's turn our attention back to the research. This is really the same graph as before. You'll see on the left-hand side, we've got the return legend. It's set at 11.2%. You will see the bubble there at the top, 11.2%, and it's a dark orange. And you can see that the income under these assumptions is maintained till the age of 90. Now let's change the return back to the implicit assumption underlying the rule of thumb. And now we're taking that income back to 8.2%. And again, I want to focus your attention on the bubble there at the top. You'll remember it was dark orange. Now it's yellow. So we are using a more conservative type of return assumption again. Now this line, that is the living annuity. I'm now going to add another line, a line for the hybrid annuity. And we're going to start off with a very low exposure to the gap. We're going to increase the exposure to the gap from 0% to 50%. And this is one of those aha moments. It's like, can this really be the case? So we're increasing the exposure. We've got it there at 0%, going up, 10%. And as it goes up, we get to 50% and we are going to leave it there. So what are the findings? The hybrid annuity is giving you the income you wanted, even though markets are performing at a 8.2% net of fee return level. But this is only up to the age of 89. When I did the research, I was like, regtig, it was so close. At the age of 90, the hybrid annuity only provided you with 99% of the income. But let's leave it there. So for now, that was for a very specific client. Let's go back to this chart. Now, the client who is 65-year-old and who's drawing 7% from his or her living annuity needs a 11.2% return without the gap. That is a dark orange return. But you will remember that with a 50% gap exposure, you or she needed a return of only 8.2%, a yellow return. Let's look at how the required return changes for all clients as we allocate to the gap. Now, the findings: if you are drawing a responsible level of income and you are invested in a hybrid annuity, you can still get the income that you want even when markets don't perform as well. This is because the required return changes. Unfortunately, some people are drawing too much and a gap can't rope the required returns back into a realistic range. To look at it differently, the yellow bubbles are those clients we view as following the rule of thumb, or following exactly what they should be doing as per the academic books. If we look at the yellow area on this chart, look at what happens when you start to allocate more towards the gap. As you can see, as you allocate more towards the gap, the yellow is starting to drift upwards. Okay, so that's basically saying with this chart, with some terms and conditions, that the rule of thumb for a hybrid annuity and the rule of thumb for a living annuity is not at the same level. In some instances, the rule of thumb on how much income you can take seems to be about 2% higher. Not to draw 5%, but to draw 7%. That is 40% more. But what are the terms and conditions or the considerations you need to take into account? The rates available at the time, and then inflation and inheritance. We need to make an assumption of low inflation. I'll discuss that later, but under low inflation conditions, at the time of doing the research, certain clients could take about a 40% higher income from a hybrid annuity and still only need the same type of market returns as they would have needed before they increased their incomes. Of course, this is based on the rates as they were at the launch of the research, and as we go through interest rate cycles, the shift might be less or it might be more. All things being equal, we could almost restate the retirement rule of thumb to: if you have a hybrid annuity, instead of 4 or 5%, you'll probably say 5 to 6 or 7%. But again, it's difficult to put a number on top of it because at the end of the day, this is rate dependent and it's time dependent. It depends on how much income you have, your age, if you have a gap, how much gap you have, and you also need to factor in inflation and inheritance. But is there something to this? We think so. But let's first turn our attention to inheritance. Now, my next question is, but at what cost? Because as I say in investments, there is no such thing as a free lunch. If you use a hybrid annuity, what is the cost you pay in terms of inheritance? Let's say you invest 2 million Rand in a hybrid annuity. 1 million Rand is in the market-linked investments, and the other million Rand is invested into a gap, and you die within 1 month. Your inheritance value would be 1 million Rand. Now, people are very concerned that if you use a hybrid annuity, that is going to have a very large effect on your ability to leave an inheritance. When I started this research, I was also thinking, it's one of those things that you really can't get around. And then again, the findings were very interesting. What I'm going to show you now is the market value or inheritance value of a living annuity under the rule of thumb return assumptions of 8.2%. And you can see the trajectory over time. Now, as I'm allocating more towards the gap, of course, the market value of the hybrid annuity is going to reduce. Before I hit play, I'm going to tell you what's about to happen. The value is going to drop by 1 million Rand. So it's going to be 2 million Rand for the living annuity and 1 million Rand for the hybrid annuity. But look at what happens in the long run. It feels a bit counterintuitive at first. And you can see, as it falls, look at what happens now when you get a proper allocation towards the gap. The living annuity is only giving you 16% of the income you wanted under the return assumptions, but the hybrid annuity is giving you 99% of the income you wanted. At the same time, eventually, the inheritance value from the hybrid annuity becomes more than the inheritance value from the living annuity. So a huge difference in terms of the income certainty you get, and you may leave a better inheritance as well, or have a better chance of leaving a better inheritance. This can potentially mean the difference between leaving an inheritance and leaving a negative inheritance. But there is an inheritance shortfall in the initial years. But if you have a sharp eye, you will remember that I didn't take a pure life annuity. I added a 10-year guarantee term, and due to this, the inheritance shortfall is largely offset, because if you die, all remaining income payments in the guaranteed term are commuted and paid into the living annuity into a money market. The hump there is the commuted value. Now, all of a sudden, there's not such a big shortfall anymore. What is the trade-off? Some shortfall initially compared to a better long-term income and potentially a higher inheritance. The initial shortfall can also be reduced by extending the guarantee term. We've looked at what happens under different guarantee terms: 11 years, 12 years, 13 years, 14, 15 years. You can see on the 15-year example, the difference is very marginal. Now, there are three things happening at the same time here: a lower initial shortfall, but with a reduction in the inheritance gain in the long run, and less income certainty due to the reduction in the gap income. This was all under a specific return assumption of 8.2%. When using a higher net of fee return assumption, it will favor the living annuity. But even if we increase it to almost 10%, the hybrid is still a very different proposition. But let me state it up front. When markets are running very hard for very long, let's say at 15% or even higher, it's great to be in a living annuity. It's better to be in a living annuity. But it's when markets don't do that well, that's when a living annuity can bite you. So as we're increasing the return assumption, the living annuity inheritance value is not really increasing, as the income is still putting too much strain on the value. But it's not a linear process. Note that the crossover point in this example was just before 80, and now is just after 80 when the return assumption is increased. So up to now, I've covered the rule of thumb, and I've shown a large section of the research on hybrid annuities. But I have not touched on inflation yet. I think if the rule of thumb had to be officially rewritten for hybrid annuities, you should expand it to mention inflation. It would be something like this, where low inflation means an inflation rate of, say, 5%. But what about long-term inflation of 6% or 7%? The problem is that inflation can have a very negative effect on people's retirement, as they need to draw much more than planned from their investments. It does not help if your income grows by 5%, but your expenses grows by 10%, especially not in the long run. A solution is, of course, to use a life annuity or a gap where the income increases are linked to inflation. Let's have a look. So again, assume you invested 2 million Rand in a hybrid annuity, with 1 million Rand in market-linked assets and the other million Rand invested into a gap. But this time, I want to show two different types of gaps. The first gap, a gap with a fixed escalation rate as before, and then a gap with an income escalation linked to inflation. At the time of doing the research, the starting income on a 5% escalating gap was about 7,400 Rand, as indicated by the blue bars, whereas the starting income on a similar but an inflation-linked gap was 6,800, as indicated by the red bars, about 550 Rands lower. If inflation is assumed to be 5% and it remains at this level into the future, the inflation-linked gap would also increase by 5% per year, and the income will remain a little bit lower than the 5% escalating gap. But what happens when inflation is higher? Let's say 7%. Let's have a look. When you retire, it's hard to predict how inflation might affect the level of income you will have to draw from your living annuity. With this in mind, we've done research to see how Momentum Wealth's inflation-linked guaranteed annuity portfolio, or GAP, can help clients maintain the now inflated retirement income they need. An interesting point from the research can be seen in this example. When assuming inflation is higher in the long run, at say 7%, the income from the inflation-linked gap at age 90 will be nearly 50% higher than the gap with the 5% escalation rate. This is because the income from the gap increases as inflation increases, or vice versa. When inflation turns out to be high, this may give you much higher income payments from the gap compared to the gap that provides fixed escalations. This can help your living annuity to maintain its purchasing power, especially if markets-linked investments don't perform exceedingly well. One aspect that I've changed on this chart was to add a new income required, one that has an escalation that is linked to inflation. This is shown by the higher of the two grey areas. This may be a better representation of the income you would need in future in a higher inflation environment. So for the next few slides, I'm going to assume that this is the income you need. But before I do, I want to point out how close the income from the inflation-linked gap at the age of 90 is to the lower of the two grey areas. That is, the income that is linked to 5% escalation instead of inflation. So now I want to show you firstly what happens to the income of a living annuity and the income of a hybrid annuity with a fixed escalation gap when they are faced with providing an income that is increasing faster than before due to higher inflation. As can be seen, they can fall short much earlier than any of the examples I've shown today. But hopefully the market-linked investments have exposure to real assets, that is, assets that can keep up with inflation. If they have this type of exposure, then hopefully they can also provide a higher return. But even at 11.2% net of fee return, they fail to keep up with the required income that is now increasing by 7% per year. Let's see what happens when using a hybrid annuity with an inflation-linked gap. We are again starting with an assumed 8.2% return and a 5% inflation rate. At these levels, the hybrid annuity is not maintaining the income to the age of 90, or as was previously the case to the age of 89. But now I'm going to increase the assumed inflation rate. This time round, the income from the inflation-linked gap escalates with inflation, leading to the income failing but a bit later and definitely not as rapidly as before. And if I now increase the return like before, you can see that now the income is sustained until very close to 90. I want to run through the example one last time, but this time I'm going to remove the gap incomes and only show the actual incomes you will get when using a living annuity or hybrid annuities. Starting again at 8.2% return and 5% inflation, you would recognize the income profiles. As I increase inflation, the hybrid annuity with the inflation-linked gap is able to maintain the income a few years longer, and the reduction is not that steep. When increasing the return, the hybrid annuity that offers protection against inflation is much better at providing the income required. When compared to the gap with a 5% escalation, the gap that is linked to inflation will naturally be a better choice when inflation surges even higher than this, and vice versa. This gives great insights into how you can protect yourselves against one of the key risks of retirement, inflation risk. Another risk to consider is longevity risk. Longevity risk is essentially the risk of outliving your money. There are many ways to counteract longevity risk when you retire in a living annuity. Some of the ways to counteract longevity risk are drawing a lower income, aiming for a higher return, or using a hybrid annuity. In many instances, the best solution may be to try and withdraw a lower income from your annuity. Reducing the starting income by about 2% could even mean that your income can last for a decade longer. If that is not possible, you can also take on more investment risk with the aim to potentially achieving higher returns. This can help you stretch your retirement savings, but when markets underperform, this could lead to bigger losses and an even greater strain on your income sustainability. Lastly, if you allocate some of your retirement funds to a gap, the guaranteed income can help you reduce longevity risk, as a gap or a life annuity is a natural way to reduce longevity risk. By using a gap, you can reduce many of the key risks in retirement. Risks such as market risk, longevity risk, and inflation risk. Until now, I've spoken about 4 of the 5 key risks and how they can be mitigated when using a hybrid annuity. These are the risks of drawing a too high income, market risk, inflation risk, and longevity risk. I've also spoken about how these variables, specifically market return, can affect inheritance. That leaves us with the last of 5 key retirement risks, and that is behavior tax. What is a behavior tax? Let me show you by using an actual example. This is an actual client that made a switch early in 2024. The red line was the original performance, and for a reason that I can only speculate on, the client switched to a very conservative fund. Behavior tax relates to the question, what if? What would have happened had the client resisted the switch itch? This is what would have happened. The switch was a very good plan for the first 3 months, but after that, it destroyed value. So initially, the client had behavioral returns, but it soon changed into what Paul Nixon, our behavioral finance guru, calls a behavior tax. Basically, the cost of your actions, the cost of your switching behavior. Now, behavior tax does not imply a negative return. It just means you got a lower return due to the switch as compared to doing nothing. So behavior tax is not a tax payable to SARS. It's more like a fee or opportunity cost that causes a reduction in your return. To understand why we see this as one of the key retirement risks, I have to take a few steps back and talk about data and behavioral finance. The saying, data is the new oil, is often misunderstood. Data is the new oil means that data, like oil, is not useful in its raw state. It needs to be refined, processed, and turned into something useful. Its value lies in its potential, and this can be even more valuable than oil. One way in which we have processed and refined our data and turned it into insight is by analyzing investor behavior, more specifically, switching behavior. This was done by taking actual switching data of clients on the Momentum Wealth platform in its raw state and refining it to become insight. Around 150,000 switches have been researched to create the findings. Our research into investor behavior meant that we applied machine learning algorithms to our data to better understand not just how much behavior tax was paid, but also if we could understand if those clients who switched could be classified into different groupings or archetypes. This could be proven by using an unsupervised machine learning algorithm, namely a clustering algorithm. This was done to find groups of investors with similar switching behavior. When our data was run through the algorithm, we ended up with 4 clusters or 4 archetypes of investor personalities: the avoider, the anxious investor, the assertive investor, and the market timer. You can learn more about this by reading the Momentum Sci-Fi report. Some of the key findings in the latest report was that in the 2024 cycle, investors destroyed about 60 million rand in value through switching, and this was only on LISP investments and living annuities. The living annuity clients that made a behavioral switch paid 4.26% in behavior tax. This figure is analyzed. In part, this is because the most unpopular funds from which they switched delivered up to a 14% better return in the next year, implying what they should have done was a very difficult thing to do in investments, but it was to do nothing. They should just have resisted the switch itch. It is worth noting that many of the key findings are based on living annuity data. Clients in living annuities pay a very high behavior tax. A further part of the research was used to understand which factors of an investment can be used to build a predictive switching model. Here the team used the random forest algorithm, a form of supervised machine learning, to do this. This provided us with a list of factors which are the best predictors of behavior. Some of the attributes that make investors more likely to switch is the size of the investment and the age of the investor. Both factors are prevalent in living annuities. And this is why a behavior tax can be a key risk to your retirement success. And this is just another reason why having a financial advisor is so important. To end of today's session are 3 short examples that provide more insights into the use of hybrid annuities. The first looks at the effective starting income. How can you use the retirement income rule of thumb to improve your retirement? Under a low inflation assumption, the retirement income rule of thumb has an implicit return assumption. And this level isn't too high or too low. In many instances, it is a net of fee return assumption that is just more than 8%. When breaking the rule of thumb, that is, when you draw an income higher than this, you increase the return that is required to sustain your income. This can be rectified by using a hybrid solution, as it can lower the return that is required to sustain your income. And this effectively lowers the starting income that has to be drawn from your market-linked investments. As I increase the exposure to the gap, you can see that the effective starting income starts to reduce. At a 50% allocation to the gap and a 50% allocation to the market-linked assets, the market-linked assets are funding just 36% of the full income. This means that even though you are drawing 7% from your living annuity, you are effectively only drawing 5.1% from your market-linked assets. This means that you won't need an 11% plus return, but a return much closer to 8% or 9% to sustain your income. In some instances, like when I increase the gap exposure to, for example, 60%, it can shift the effective starting income back to a 4 or a 5% level without changing the level of income you receive. In this example, again, I want to answer the question, how can I use the retirement income rule of thumb to improve my retirement? In the example, I have a 2 million rand investment, and the income required is set at a starting level of 5%. You will see on the return legend and on the corresponding green bubble that I'm starting the example with a 6% return assumption. This will determine how long the income can last. At this level of return, you start to run out of income in your early 80s. This is the point at which you hit the 17.5% legislative cap on your living annuity. So what return is needed to sustain your income? Under a low inflation assumption, a net of fee return assumption of just more than 8% will do. When breaking the rule of thumb, you increase the return that is required to sustain your income. This can be rectified by using a hybrid solution, as the guaranteed income payments from the guaranteed annuity portfolio or the GAP can alleviate the pressure on the market-linked investments. In many instances, this could lead to a more sustainable income even when markets aren't performing that well. In the last example, I want to show how an actual client's living annuity performed, and I want to show how the same client would have performed had he been invested in a hybrid annuity for the last plus minus 22 years. In this research, we looked back at how the client's actual return changed over time as measured by his internal rate of return or his IRR. We then did a backtest of what the IRR would have been if he or she had been invested in a hybrid annuity for more than 20 years, assuming that the product was launched way back then instead of 2022. But what is an IRR? An IRR is really an easy to understand concept. Simply put, what return did you get? Let me use an example. Let's say the market performed as follows in 5 calendar years, starting in 2003. 10%, 12%, 12%, then at 5%, then at 11%. After 1 year, the client would have had a return of 10%. The next year, his return overall would have been 11%, almost midway between 10 and 12. The return of 12% in 2005 would further have increased his IRR to 11.3%. And then the low return of 5% in 2006 would have reduced his IRR to 9.7%, with the last 11% return in 2007 taking him back to a 10% overall IRR. So, with this in mind, let's look at the return assumptions that we use when doing the backtest. In the backtest, I used the following assumption for the gap. Note that the starting annuity income in 2003 was one of the lowest points in the last 22 years. And this is how it looked. This is the client's actual IRR experience. It took a bit of a dip in 2008 with the global financial crisis, and it looked like the client switched into a much more conservative fund for the next few years. It is likely that the client paid a behavior tax due to this switch. An interesting note is that annuity rates were much lower than they are today, and as such, the client would have received a much lower guaranteed income for the past 20 years than what a similar person would have locked in at today. In addition, the client retired in his mid-50s, and as such, he had a lower starting income compared to what, let's say, a 65-year-old would have started off with. In terms of the comparison, the hybrid annuity's IRR was negative at first, as expected, but it turned positive reasonably quickly because of the guarantee term. The guarantee term ran out 10 years after the inception of the policy, and from this point, the hybrid annuity IRR gradually closes the distance between itself and the living annuity IRR. It also nicely mimics the COVID-19 dip and recovery in 2020. At the date of the analysis, the client had not yet turned 80, and we expect that the IRRs will cross soon in about 3.5 years. With the guaranteed annuity portfolio, with a starting income similar to what is available in 2025, the crossover would have occurred 4.5 years ago, just after the COVID-19 market fall and correction. So what does it mean if the IRRs cross? If it were to cross today, it means that every payment from the gap is now free cash, as the market value of the market-linked assets in both the investments are equal. To put it into perspective, if the IRRs crossed, and if I assume an initial investment of 2 million Rand, the value of this market-linked assets in both instances would have been 1.4 million Rand today. But the hybrid annuity would have been injected by an additional 174,000 Rand from the gap in the next 12 months. In future, these injections would continue until the client dies, and they would grow by 5% every year. Stated differently, the gap could provide a potential injection of 1.4 million Rand in the next 7 years. That is worth more than the current value of the living annuity. Now to end off, by using a gap, you can reduce many of the key risks in retirement. Risks such as market risk, longevity risk, and inflation risk. To determine the right allocation and type of gap for you, you'll need a second pair of hands, those of a financial advisor.
This video is intended for educational purposes only and should not be regarded as financial advice. For more information, visit our website or speak to a financial advisor about the guaranteed annuity portfolio from Momentum Wealth.